I do believe this is a happy blower. Hey, how you doing? Nope, my name's not Steve. I'm the lawnmower lady, and I like fixing small engines. This backpack blower might look familiar to you. It's because it is. In a prior video, I did a valve adjustment in an attempt to deal with a hard starting issue and the fact that it was bogging down after about 5 minutes. It helped, but it didn't fix the problem, so now I'm forced to throw some parts at it, and I'm going to show you how I replace the fuel filter and rebuild the carb. So to get the carb, there's 4 screws to remove, one there, a couple on the underside. This is a T27 Torx, and this is a very coarse screw that's going into plastic. These 2 are way, way deep inside of here. And next are the 3 screws that hold on the recoil. These 3 screws are very fine threads. They're going into metal casing. This cover pops right off. There's these 2 rubber boots that made up with those. Next is to remove the air cover. These are captive screws. They don't come out of the case. And this air filter sort of looks okay. I don't think that's really causing the problem. 2 screws that hold the carb in. And 1 more screw right here. You can remove this air baffle. It's not necessary, but you do need to worry about getting this back of the airbox sort of in between there. If you can see, there's a little orange part there. This is a 3rd type of screw, sort of a medium coarse thread. This sort of comes all off here. Get this impulse tube off of there. These screws can come out. Remove the throttle cable. Just push that all the way out of the way and break it out of its little hole, and it will slide out like that. Then make sure you pay attention to the path of these fuel lines. I'll pop those out. There we go. Oops, I forgot to release tank pressure. Oh well, live and learn. This carb needs to come off of this airbox here. I'll try to do this without damaging this gasket. Push on the back of this little guy. There we go. Oh, and I have, unfortunately, this gasket broke in this process. Don't lose this little grommet right here. That's required. And this fuel line, I don't think I need to replace that. It feels sort of okay. Choke mechanism works fine. So to make it easier to access this fuel grommet right here, I'm going to turn the blower over. We're going to remove the tank. There's 2 more screws right there. And yet a 4th type of screw. Very, very coarse thread. This will make it a lot easier to access this fuel grommet. I'm going to get some brake cleaner, try to clean off some of this so no dirt goes inside of there. You might be tempted to use carb cleaner here. Don't do that. That'll eat into this rubber pretty badly. Now we can also check the vent. Pop that open right there. The tank vent is probably fine. It sort of looks okay. It's only a one-way vent, so you can just put some pressure on that and you should only see it. You should only feel it moving in one direction. I just tried that and it seems to be working fine and it's not clogged up. Same procedure here. Pop up on this plastic part and you want to make sure this O-ring is in good shape. And we'll be replacing this fuel filter. Oh yeah, it's much more clogged than I thought it was in the previous video. Remove the old filter. Replace this with a Zama ZF4. This is shown as the part number on a lot of diagrams for this particular blower. This fuel line feels really good. It looks okay. And if you have a BR600 blower, it is going to have a separate, it's going to have two fuel filters on here. One of them is going to have two barbs on there to have two pickups inside the tank. So this one only has one. Clean up the inside of this lip. Don't want to introduce any dirt inside the tank here. And align that. You want to press down real firmly because you want to feel that O-ring engage and pop in there. And it's being recalcitrant. So this is really not wanting to go in, so I'm going to help it along here. A rubber hammer. There we go. And this vent cap. Also make sure it pops all the way in. There we go. And our fuel tank should be good to go. And this is a T27 little socket. I'm just not fond of using impact tools to put stuff back together. And just a quick test to make sure everything is working fine on the fuel filter side. Oops. Tighten the cap back down, and it is purging fuel through the system. Although this clogged up fuel filter might have been the only problem, there's sort of no point in not replacing everything while we've got it here. This is a JIS screwdriver. And these screws all come out. This pops off right here. And that cover looks all right. This is the pump diaphragm, and it feels a little crunchy. Like I said, we're already in here. We're going to be replacing all of that. This gasket looks like it's in good shape. Less trouble to take that guy off of there if I don't need to. Next is to remove the needle. Pop that out of there. There's a teeny tiny spring, the hinge pin, and the lever itself. And then the needle, hopefully, I can get that out without damaging that gasket. There we go. Onto the other side. The actual pump looks okay, but there is a good amount of dust and dirt stuck inside that screen. Use a pick or something to get that out. There's a little bit in there, not completely clogged up, but enough to make a difference. I am going to run this through my ultrasonic parts cleaner. And if I don't have to remove any of these gaskets, I will not, because I don't want to spend all the time scraping all the gaskets off if there are no tears and they're in good shape. And lastly, I want to pull out the adjustment screws, so I have to pop off these limiters because I want to record their current settings because I don't want to have to start over from scratch again. Just lever those right up. Oh, I might find that one someday. And this one sort of destroyed itself. There we go. I need to remove these adjustment screws, but before I do that, I want to make sure I can get them back to the adjustment that they were. You can tell this is the high adjustment screws. There's an H right there. Here's the low. And in order to make sure I get them back in the right spot, I'm going to use like a white paint marker. I'm going to put one little paint marker right there on the part of that screw that lines up right with the H. And then on this one, that one is pointing towards the L. So I'll be able to get these back in the exact location. Going to very gently, this is the low screw, we're going to count the number of turns. Going to turn in very slowly until it bottoms out, and we're going to count the number of turns that it took to get there. There's one full turn, and keep on going around a little bit more. You don't want to really force these beyond where they're sort of leveled in. So that's really about 1 1/3 turns out. So there's that third of a turn. And then that would be its original point. So we're going to remove this guy. Generally, these are different sizes. There's the low screw. And he is 1 1/3 turns out. Same thing with the high screw. Going to see how far in it is. There's one full turn. That's 2 full turns. It's 3 full turns. And it is bottoming out at about 3 1/3. So we can take this one all the way out. You see, this is a little shorter. It's usually the case. And that high screw was 3 1/3 turns out. So my preferred cleaning solution is Pine Sol and water. It has enough solvent properties to dissolve any bits of varnished gasoline. I just put it in any old container, and then that allows me to keep plain water actually inside my bath so I can keep that cleaner. About 20 minutes, we'll see what happens. Ooh, there's lots of good stuff coming out of that carb. So hopefully that ultrasonic cleaner is not too loud. This is RB134, which is the kit for this carb. I'm going to pull everything out and make sure it all matches up. Some of these kits that you buy, not this one, are going to have extra parts that you really don't need. But I'm going to be replacing as many parts as I can. So here's the screen, new spring, hinge pin. I might use the same hinge pin, a new Welch plug. I think that's all right. The actual fuel pump itself That looks the same. I think the gaskets are not damaged. I might have to pull this guy out if he's going to be a problem for me. And the actual metering diaphragm is far less crunchy than this one is. Now, since I don't have this gasket, I've got another one from another weed whacker. I'm going to just make one for right now. I'll see if I can get the right ones on order, but I might need to let it go like this. Just really need to cut out the intake so it matches the other one. I think this will be fine. So I think this will be great. Trying not to gouge the faces of the plastic part, but to clean up all that old gasket. The ultrasonic cleaner just stopped. Got all those gasket faces clean. When you're making a gasket, you just want to make sure you're not restricting the actual size of the intake. So I think this will be great. So these parts are out of the ultrasonic cleaner, and as suspected, this gasket face softened up, so I can replace that. Hopefully it comes off in one piece. Yeah, it's doing all right. Little impulse guy there. And there's a little bit of trash in there, so that's good that that came apart. I don't like using carb spray, that's why I use the ultrasonic cleaner, but just to rinse stuff off and make sure there's no more pine sol in there. Same thing, make sure these passages are clear. Not a lot, just a few drops. I'll have to clean off this gasket face as well. I think all the pine sol is out of here. And I'm just scraping all the way across, not introducing any more junk into the throat. I want to make sure that's completely clean. If there's ever any question, maybe you didn't take pictures or you forgot, when you're putting these back together, the gaskets always go on the part that has like a ridge on it. I'm not replacing this gasket because, as you can see, they're kind of a pain to get off, but this gasket is in good shape. It did not loosen up. Gasket first, then the pump. It only goes on one way. There are two locating pins right there, and then this guy goes next. You might have to pull the throttle out of the way to get him to sit on there. Oops. Don't fall off. Next, again, is this gasket. There are locating pins. Yes, it is a puzzle. It only goes on one way. This spring. This is all cleaned up. Next, again, is this rubbery pump. Put that on where the pins locate there and there. Then the last thing is you want to line up these locating pins with those holes right there. Make sure that's all on there. Then you can replace the screws on this side. You get these good and snug, but you don't want to strip them out. And guess what I forgot to put on there? I forgot the intake screen. I won't torture you. The new screen goes right in there, and you can use either a punch or a small drill bit to push that in. And make sure it's all the way down and none of it's sticking up. There you go. I'll be right back. Sorry about that. And move on to the needle and seat. So I believe that the old needle was fine, but while I'm in here, I'm just going to replace all these parts. That goes in this hole right here. You have to make sure the top of that is going to clear the gasket that I did not remove. And next thing is the new spring. It fits right in that depression right there. And here is the real fiddly part. I'm going to use the old level arm because I know that's at the right height. Insert the hinge pin, and then we have to push the forked part underneath the pin, needle, pardon me, and make sure that the spring sits right on top of that little dimple there. So like I said, this is the fiddly part. Going to set that in just like so. He will scoop up under there. And if everything worked out right, which it almost did, my spring came off that little dimple. There we go. We're going to replace the screw that holds on that hinge pin. And this needle moves freely. Now the key thing here is to make sure, if you were using the new leveling arm, Zama does make a little gauge depending on what your carburetor is of where that needle is. And of course I can't use this because I did not replace the gasket, but you could use this gauge to determine if you need to adjust that level right there. Next is the metering diaphragm. You can put this on backwards. There's a tiny hole right here that has to line up with that tiny hole right there. Also mates up with that. There is no locating pins, so you want to make sure you get that on right. Drop all these screws in. Make sure they're not snagging anything and tighten them all down. Get them all started first. And again, you can strip these out, so just make sure they're good and snug. Now to replace the screws, mixed screws, just clean off the ends of those with a little Scotch-Brite. The low one goes in the low hole right there. Get that started. And remember, we're going to go till that bottoms out. Don't force it because you can break it, but looks like we're all the way there. And the low screw was 1 1/3 turns out, and my little white mark matched up with the L mark right there. So there is 1/3 and one more full turn out. There, the little white mark matches up with the L. Next is the high screw. And these actually have different thread pitches, so it's kind of hard to mess it up, but you can. Get that started. I'm going to screw this in till it bottoms out. A little bit more. And the high screw was 3 1/3. So here is our, and it's got to match up with the H. Remember, that's where we put the white paint marker on there. So there is the 1/3, oops, a little bit more. There's the 1/3 of a turn. So you do 3 more complete turns. So there is 1, 2, and 3. Time to put this back together. So now we're going to reassemble all this. I take these screws. This will just help hold the carb on. Replace our homemade intake gasket. And the carb, this has to go through that hole right there. All that sort of holds on together. This fuel line intake goes on there. Fit him. Remember, had to fit in these little channels. Next is the purge line. Have to operate your throttle to get the clearance to drop that guy in. Place that guy in there. So you need to make sure that the throttle cable is behind the fuel lines and this ignition cable's in front. The reason is this little tab right there has to line up on there, and otherwise you won't be able to get that on. Now this screw right here has to go through there on the other side of this baffle. It's got to be kind of careful how you place that. Make sure this impulse hose goes back on there. Make sure those ignition wires are behind that little keeper. And then everything looks like it's lining up. We can tighten down these carb screws. Make sure both of those are tight. Not too tight. Next is this medium coarse thread that goes in to hold on the back of the airbox. See the little orange part behind there? Make sure everything works. There's the choke. That works. Check the throttle. Make sure that works. Yep, that's good. Replace the air filter. And the airbox cover. Before we get started putting the cover on, I'm going to make sure that the throttle cable is in that little groove right there. And remember, these rubber boots have to fit on top of this guy. Plus there's this little slot right there, which has to go inside of that slot right there. These are the 3 very fine thread screws for the recoil. And lastly, the 4 very coarse thread screws. Ones on the bottom, you sort of have to stand on your head, but get them all started before you actually tighten them all down. Spark plug back on. Fuel system works. Choke works. Let's see if this pig will start. All right, choke is on. Pump it a few times. Give it a little while to warm up. About 5 minutes in. So far, so good. All right, I'm about 10 minutes into this. I've been running it a little bit every now and then, and I do believe so carb kit and fuel filter took care of this, along with the valve adjustment in the other video, running like a champ right now. If you like the video, push the like button. Helps out the channel a whole lot. If you want to watch the video where I did the valve adjustment with not much more than an empty beer can, watch this video right here. I'm the Lawnmower Lady, and as I like to say, blow happy. Oh, wait. Till the next video, guys. Cheers. Steve out.